네, 안녕하십니까. 영어 섀도잉 107일차 연습 시작해 보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 오늘은 새로운 영상 한번 다뤄보겠습니다. 새로운 영상은요, 먼저 닐 디그레스 타이슨 네, 영상을 먼저 한번 다뤄보도록 하겠습니다. 오늘은 자막을 보면서 한 주씩 듣고 따라하는 걸로 연습을 하겠습니다.
Can't wait till the summer holidays. So many people can't wait till school ends.
So many people can't wait till school ends. So many people can't wait till school ends.
Can't wait till the summer holidays.
Can't wait till the summer holidays. Can't wait till the summer holidays.
What are you in a hurry to do? To stop learning?
What are you in a hurry to do? 다시 한번 들어볼까요?
Can't wait till school ends. Can't wait till the summer holidays. What are you in a hurry to do?
What are you in a hurry to do? What are you in a hurry to do? What are you in a hurry to do?
Stop learning?
To stop learning? What are you in a hurry to do? What are you in a hurry to do? To stop learning?
This is the only time in your life where your job was to learn.
This is the only time in your life when your job was to learn. This is the only time in your life when your job was to learn.
That was your job.
That was your job.
That's all people expected of you.
That's what all people expected of you. That's what all people expected of you. That's what all people.
That was your job. That's all people expected of you.
That's what all people expected of you. That's what all people expected of you.
Now you're being cast forth, and I'm.
Now you're being cast forth. Now you're being cast forth.
That's all people expected of you. Now you're being cast forth.
Now you are being cast forth. Now you're being cast forth.
And I'm expecting.
And I'm hoping, I'm expecting
That you're not saying to yourself,
that you are not saying yourself. You are not saying yourself.
Done learning.
I'm done learning.
Because if that's how you think and feel.
Because if that's how you think and feel. Because if that's how you think and feel. Because if that's how you think and feel.
You will slide
back to the cave.
Because everyone else who keeps learning will pass you by, and that's slide back to the cave. Because everyone else who keeps learning will pass you by and slide back to the cave. Because everyone else who keeps learning will pass you by.
Because everyone else who keeps learning will pass you by. Because everyone else who keeps learning because everyone else who keeps learning will pass you by.
And that's where you end up,
and that's where you'll end up.
If you didn't think you were headed there.
Even if you didn't think you are headed there. Even if you didn't think you are headed there. Even if you didn't think you are headed there. Even if you didn't think you are headed there. Even if you didn't think you are headed there.
I just want to highlight a few things. I'm worried, really.
I just want to highlight a few things.
I just want to highlight a few things.
I want to just highlight a few things.
I just want to highlight a few.
I want to just highlight
things.
a few
worried,
things.
Really.
Oh, worried, really.
How much fuzzy thinking is going on in the world.
About how much the fuzzy thinking is going on in the world.
Fuzzy thinking. People just not.
Fuzzy thinking. People just not
thinking
straight.
I reflect on the time with my sister.
I reflect on the time with my sister. I reflect on the time with my sister. I reflect on the time with my sister.
My sister is younger than I am, 4 years older.
My sister is younger than I. My sister is younger than I. I'm 4 years older. I am 4 years older. I'm 4 years older. My sister is younger than I'm. I'm 4 years older.
So I'm like a whole school ahead of her, right?
So I'm like a whole scrub.
Younger than I am, 4 years older. So I'm like a whole school ahead of her.
So I'm like a whole school ahead of her. Whole school ahead of her. I'm like a whole school ahead of her.
Right? So I'm graduating high school.
So I'm
She's
graduating high school.
entering high
She's
school.
entering high
Graduating
school.
college.
I'm graduating. I'm graduating college.
She entering college. And so,
She's entering college.
so
And so
one time
sometime
I said,
I said,
so Lynn, where do you want to go have lunch today?
Lynn, where do you wanna
I said, so Lynn, where do you want to go have lunch today?
where do you wanna go up go to have go up where do you wanna go up where do you wanna go up let go have lunch today, Lynn, where do you wanna go up where you wanna go have lunch today, Lynn, where you wanna go have lunch today, where do you wanna go to have lunch today, where do you wanna go to have lunch today, where do you wanna go to have lunch today, where do you wanna go have lunch today, where do you wanna go have 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 lunch today,
Because I had some cash and
because I had some cash because I had some cash because I have some cash.
you know.
You know,
And she said, well, what are my choices?
well, what are my choices? Well, what are my choices? What are my choices? What are my choices? She said, what are my choices?
It was odd because I didn't realize until that
It was all because I didn't realize. It was all because I didn't realize
moment
until the moment
that
that
she was not yet
she was not
capable
yet capable
of simply coming up
of
with
simply
a fresh idea.
of simply coming up with a fresh idea. That she was not yet capable of simply coming up with a fresh idea. That, that she was not yet capable of simply coming up with a fresh idea. She was not yet capable of simply coming up with a fresh idea. With a with a fresh idea. She was not yet capable of simply coming up with a fresh idea.
Why?
Why?
Because she'd spent
Because
her whole life
because she had spent her whole life she has she has spent her whole life
taking multiple choice tests.
taking multiple choice tests. Because she has spent her whole life taking multiple choice tests. Multiple choice tests. Because she spent her whole life 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 taking multiple choice tests.
So I ask a question. She wants
So I ask a question. I ask a question. So I ask a question. So I ask a question.
choices
She
in
wants choices. She wants choices
front of her
in front
to
of her
pick from.
to pick from.
This would continue the whole life.
This will continue the whole life. This will continue the whole life. This will continue the whole life. This will continue the whole life.
And then I tested this with other people.
And I tested this with other people. And I tested this with other people. And I tested this with other people. And I tested this with other people. With other people. And I tested this with other people. And I tested this with other people.
People want choices.
People want choices.
And I realized
And I realized
maybe it's hard to just think originally.
maybe it's hard to just think originally. Maybe it's hard to just think originally. Think originally. Maybe it's hard to just 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 think originally.
And come up with a fresh thought.
And come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to think. Maybe it's hard to just think. Maybe it's hard to just think originally. Maybe it's hard to just think originally. Think. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought.
that the person who's offering the question hadn't thought up.
That the person who's approaching that the person who's approaching the question hadn't thought up yet. That the person who's approaching the question hadn't thought up yet. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought. That the person who's offering the question hadn't thought up yet. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought that the person who's offering the question hadn't thought of yet. Maybe it's hard to think originally and come up with a fresh thought that the person who's offering the question hadn't thought of yet. Maybe it's hard to think originally. Maybe it's hard to just think originally and come up with a fresh thought that the person who's offering the question hadn't thought of yet.
Yeah. Because I think somehow in our society,
Because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society, because I think somehow in our society,
we're hell bent on the answer.
because I think somehow in our society, we are hell-bent on the answer. We are hell-bent on the answer. We are hell-bent on the answer. Because I think in our society, because I think in our society, because I think somehow in our society, we are hell-bent on the answer. Because I think somehow in our society, we are hell-bent on the answer.
The answer, the right answer.
The answer, the right answer.
Because when it's the right answer, it's the right answer.
Because when it's the right answer, it's the right answer. Because when it's the right answer, it's the right answer. Because when it's the right answer, it's the right answer.
And when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer.
And when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer. And when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer.
The right answer, it's the right answer.
It's the
And when
right-
it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer.
It's not the right answer. And when it's the wrong answer, and when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer. And when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer. And when it's the wrong answer, when it's the wrong answer, and when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer. And when it's the wrong answer, it's not the right answer.
Consider this following example.
Consider this following example. Consider this following example. Consider this following example.
Imagine you have a spelling bee.
Imagine you have a spelling bee. Imagine you have a spelling bee. Imagine you have a spelling bee. Imagine you have a spelling bee. Imagine you have a spelling bee.
And you have to spell the word
Spell the word
cat.
cat. And you have to spell the word 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 cat. Imagine you have a spelling bee.
And you have to
Imagine you have a spelling bee and you have to spell the word cat. Imagine you have a spelling bee and you have to spell the word cat.
Okay.
Okay.
So one student spells it C
So one student spells it. So one student spells it, and so one student spells it
A T.
CATA. So one student spells it. You have to spell the word cat. Okay. And one student spells it CAT.
Person got it right.
Person got it right. Person got it right. Person got it right. And one student spells it CAT. You imagine you have to imagine you have a spelling bee, and you have to spell the word cat. So one student spells it CAT. Person got it right.
The next
The
person
next
spells
person
it
spells KAT.
K-A-T.
The next person spells it KAT. The next person spells it KAT. The next person spells it KAT. The next person spells it KAT.
That's wrong.
That's wrong. That's wrong.
You got that wrong.
You got that wrong. You got that wrong. Okay. You got that wrong. Okay. That's wrong. You got that wrong. The next person spells it KAT. That's wrong. You got that wrong. Okay.
Third person spells it
The
XQW.
third person spells it XQW. The next person spells it KAT. That's wrong. You got that wrong. The third person spells it XQW.
You realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT?
Do you realize that that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT? Equally as wrong with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT?
It's marked equally as wrong
Equally as
with the
wrong
KAT?
with the KAT? Do you realize that is marked equally as wrong with the KAT?
When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat.
When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat
Than CAT.
than CAT. When you could argue that KAT
Argue that KAT is a better. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT.
when you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for a cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT.
Dictionaries know this.
Dictionaries know this. Dictionaries know this. Dictionaries know this.
Because that's how. When you could argue that KAT.
Do you realize there's marked equal as wrong with the KAT? When you could argue that KAT is a better spelling for cat than CAT. Dictionaries know
When
this.
you could argue that
KAT
KAT is a better spelling for cat
than
than CAT.
CAT.
Dictionaries
Dictionaries
know
nowadays
this because that's how they spell it phonetically.
because that's how they spell it phonetically. Because that's how they spell it. That's how they spell it phonetically. Because 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 that's how they spell it phonetically.
And so we built a system for ourselves.
And so we built the system for ourselves. And so we built we we built the system for ourselves. And so we built the system for ourselves. And so we built a system for ourselves. And so we built a system for ourselves. And so we built a and so we built a system for ourselves. And so we built a system for ourselves. And so we built a system for ourselves
Where there's an answer
where there's an answer
and everything else is not the answer.
and everything else is not the answer. Everything else is not the answer. Everything else is not the answer. Uh,
System for ourselves where there's an answer
where there's an answer, where there's an answer, where there's an answer, where there's an answer. And so we built the system for ourselves where there's an answer
and everything else is not the answer.
and everything else is not the answer. And everything else is not the answer. And everything else is not the answer. And everything else is not the answer. And everything else is not the answer. Where there's where there's an where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Where there's an where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. And so we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. And so we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Okay?
Answer even when some answers are better than others.
Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers even when some answers even when some answers are better than others.
And everything else is not the answer even when some answers are better than others.
Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. And so we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. So we built a system for ourselves. And so we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. And even when some answers are better than others. So we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. Even when some answers are better than others. So we built a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Even when some answers are better than others. Okay?
So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought.
Uh,
The wiring capable of coming up with an original thought.
so our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming out with the original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable absent the wiring capable of coming up with the original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with original thought with an original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with the original thought, coming up with an with an original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought. So we build a system for ourselves where there's an answer and everything else is not the answer. Even when some answers are better than others. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought.
or thought not previously considered, or thought
Or or thought
capable of coming up with an original thought,
with an
or
original
thought not previously
with an original thought. Or a thought not
considered, or thought capable of coming up with an original thought, or thought not previously considered,
or thought not previously considered. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought, or thought not previously considered, or thought not previously considered, or thought not previously considered. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought, or thought not previously considered,
or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table.
or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table, laid on the table.
Previously considered, or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table.
The ideas that are already the ideas are the ideas that are the ideas that are already laid on the table, or a thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table,
Previously considered, or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table.
or or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table, a thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table, 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 or thought between the ideas between or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table. So our brains are absent the wiring capable of coming up with an original thought, or thought not already considered, or thought between the ideas that are already laid on the table.
What we're not valuing is knowledge as process.
What we're not valuing is knowledge as process. What we are not valuing is knowledge as process. Uh, what we are not valuing is knowledge as process. What we are not valuing is knowledge as process. What we are not valuing is knowledge as process.
Valuing is knowledge. What we're not valuing is knowledge as process.
What we are not valuing is knowledge as process,
Rather than knowledge as an answer.
rather than knowledge as an answer. Rather than knowledge as an answer. What we are not valuing is knowledge as process, rather than knowledge as an answer. As an answer. What we are not valuing is knowledge as process, rather than knowledge as an answer. Rather than knowledge as an answer. What we are not valuing is knowledge as answer. Knowledge as answer, rather than knowledge as an answer. Knowledge as an answer. What we are not valuing is knowledge as a process, rather than knowledge as an answer. Rather than knowledge as an answer. What we are not valuing is knowledge as a process, rather than knowledge as an answer.
In another example, if you're an employer
In another example,
and
if
two
you are
candidates come
if
up,
you are if you are an employer, in another example, if you are an employer
looking for a job,
and two candidates come up looking for a job, and two candidates come up looking for a job, and two candidates come up looking for a job, and two candidates come up looking for a job. In another example, if you're an employer and two candidates come up looking for a job,
you're interviewing the two candidates,
and you're interviewing, 네, 이제 이쪽에 예제는 내일 다음 시간에 하면 될 것 같습니다. 지금 한 4분 정도 되는 영상이었는데요. 그거를 이제 30분 동안 외우면서, 외워가면서 표현을 익히는 시간을 가졌습니다. 네, 감사합니다.